real inspiration. I can't say that obviously you're very provocative and wide-ranging, and I can't say that I adhere or whatever, in the broader sense of the arguments against primitivism in the ultimate. But you have been very inspiring to me, and I think a lot of other people. So, cutting through the controversies, I want to say thank you for your work. I was in Cartagena, Colombia, and visited the Museum of the Inquisition, and I found in there some quite exquisite technologies of torture and destruction at some very basic levels of the human experience, pre-industrial, pre-electricity, pre-mass transportation above and beyond sail. On the one end, I can point to that as a question. On the other end, I can point to some highly creative forms of expression that manage to manifest through both capitalism and high technology, be it the distribution, say, of an artist along the caliber of jazz musicians or any other forms of new networks of creativity that perhaps have some possibility of forming genuine emotional communities despite some of the extreme forms of technological modernity and the damage that results. Some of the, obviously, in eco and some of the more personal examples that you brought up in your talk. And what struck me was, during the comment that you made about, at the end of this woman's talk, and I'm sure you've answered this and heard this before, but I guess I would kind of like to just hear what kind of proposals. I think that kind of question mark and say, well, that's the price for modernity. I think in the absence of the community that you talk about, which I agree with you, is very real and stunning and stark, how do we form any kind of, would you propose, realistically, any kind of way of backing out of this bind without creating new forms of genocide, pain, and suffering along the lines of the Inquisition that we witnessed in the pre-technological era?
Wow, that's real good. Yeah, well, you're right. That's a good point. It didn't happen overnight. It's not that there was no oppressive stuff before late modernity or whatever we call it now. That's good to keep in mind. That's for sure. But it's not. It isn't realistic. It isn't realistic at all because we're all dependent on this stuff. Not the most extreme examples of not all of it maybe, but it's tough. It's not. That's a tough one. I mean, I don't. But it seems to me the sad thing is, as this becomes more stark, maybe the questioning will begin. I mean, for example, when you look at the claims that are made about technology, and actually sometimes you pass a certain point where the system, and it's not just technology, of course I'm dwelling on that, but I'm not, it's not everything, I'm not trying to say that, but at a certain point you get, which makes it even more difficult, they just dispense with the claims, and that's what we've seen in general terms. For example, in the US, used to be the American dream, or things are going to be always better, always a little better for your kids and all that. Well, they don't even bother anymore because everybody knows that's bullshit. That's not you. Now it's more like get on board or you're screwed. I mean, and even ads say it almost that boldly. You don't like it, well, too bad. You got no future if you don't get on board. So speaking to your thing about how about those difficulties. But I think it is helpful at least to kind of deconstruct some of the claims. For example, that we're supposed to think that all the new technology is empowering, and yet the more technology there is, the more disempowered we are, and that can't be just a coincidence. Or the claim that it offers, like the internet, for example, offers so much variety and richness and so forth. But another quote from Frederick Jameson, we live in the most standardized society that has ever existed. He was talking about North America in general, or another one, you know, if we count up the costs and the variance between what it's really giving us, then maybe you got grounds to start thinking about, the first step is to think about it as a problem, not just let it sail along. Another one I think is powerful is technology connects us. We're all connected now. We're all wired together. You know, you got the commercial with somebody in the other part of the world, in maybe Nepal or something, on a cell phone, and wow, it's great. You know, all of these cliches about the global village or whatever it is. But you know, what's going on? Getting back to the question of community for a second. The thing is, in terms of the U.S., let me just mention one thing there. American Journal of Sociology about a year ago unveiled the results of a 19-year study, which really coincides with a personal computer revolution, or whatever the word is. Really dates from the beginning of the 80s, basically. So this is a 19-year period from the middle 80s to the mid, I think 2005, and studying isolation. And in a nutshell, it was a study of how many friends people have, defined as people you confide in. It's a general definition. And they said, I don't know how they talked to thousands of people in the U.S., and they said the average number of friends adult Americans had was 3 in 1985. 19 years later, it was 2. 50% fewer friends as you get more and more technology. And the number of people with no friends had tripled in 19 years. And as we also know from many other sources, the number of people living alone, single-person households, keeps going straight up. So it's not connecting people. It's only connecting people in a machine sense, I would say. So in other words, when these things are so threadbare, and they're at least part of a terrible result in society, then who wants that after a while? I mean, there's a lot of disaffection right now, I think, but it has to be at least made a question, you know, for discussion. Even if Chomsky or anybody else on the left or right doesn't like it, it's time to, you know, what are we going to do? Nobody's going to cook up some answer, some brilliant person. Obviously, it's a social question. It can only be answered by all of us, or, you know, ideally, as many people as care about this and think that maybe we could try to, you know, confront it. I mean, I guess that's the best we can do. I mean, there may come a time when people just figure this is not worth it. And there's got to be a connection, too, with just the other levels of emptiness and desolation that you feel, and which Sherry Turkle spoke to in various ways. You know, how many millions of people, at least in the U.S., need anti-anxiety drugs to get through the day, antidepressants? You know, this is a hollowing out of life, of daily life, of the texture of life. All that stuff is just being leached out. And it's easy to see. I mean, who says, oh no, you're wrong, things are healthy, things are vital. The industrialization, but a key component of that, this is my view on it anyway, is co-opting indigenous cultures and breaking the resistance of indigenous cultures. And that's what the left does. And that's a very condensed generalization there, and Morales is indigenous, but he's a lifetime politician, so it doesn't matter to me. I mean, if you want the industrialization of South America, then you get it. If you don't want it, though, if you care, for example, if you don't want the erasure of indigenous cultures, then you have a problem with that. You know what I mean? That's you know, frankly, to me, in a nutshell, that's the problem of the left. The progress, mass society, that's the answer. To us, it's not the answer. It's the problem.
I'm not sure Morales would count himself among the traditional left, nor would Chavez, and nor at the end Castro. And yet,
really?
And yet, at the end, no. His allies were gone. He had to come up with something that was much more indigenous to Cuba, and that didn't rely on the traditional
Oh, I don't see anything
Forces
as
of
close
the
to my
left.